But we also had a big screen porch, so that was,
Yeah.
that was, they were, the whole street was a very pretty street with,
Like when we lived in our apartment, a two-bedroom apartment, the kitchen and a living room and two bedrooms, that was an upgrade from where we had been living because at least it was facing the street. Before that, they had a lot of these six flats where there were three flats in the front, and then they had a common center
That's the kind of building
stairway,
we lived in.
and then they had three
Three in the
flats
back.
in the back.
We faced the alley.
That's right.
And you know what I remember about those buildings in Chicago, that they had these wooden, like, porches.
Yeah.
And people used to hang their laundry out there
Oh,
on the
sure.
porches and
Well,
everything.
and also
Hung the
go out
laundry
there.
outside.
Yeah.
My mother had a big pulley. We hanged the clothes. Oh,
One of the other interesting points was, that Dad, why don't you tell the connection between the two families? Between the Croft family and the LaBoyer family?
Well, the Croft family and the LaBoyer family, my aunt, my mother's sister, Esther, was married to a Wallowich who
Was Lena's
Was my brother-in-law's
was Lena's brother. So when we were growing up, very often in Esther's family, she would have on the weekends many of the family over at her house. She was a very outgoing person, and she liked to cook and to entertain. And very often we went there also because Esther was our aunt, and Abe and Esther were uncle and aunt to Victor and Manley and Seymour.
So you knew all of them?
Oh, we knew all of them.
And you knew the store on the west side?
Oh, sure, because that was only a couple of blocks, not even a couple of blocks, a block and a half from where we lived.
So when I started dating Danny, it was just a matter of which brother's
That's right.
son it was when you heard the last name?
Right. So is it Victor or Manley or Seymour?
Neither of whom were married when Vic and I got married. The youngest
Just
married.
thinking.
Well,
could've
we
said
didn't.
He tried. But Vic was the youngest, but he was the first one married, and Seymour was the middle one, and he was the second one married, and then finally we got Manley married. But anyhow, we did spend the summer to get, going to school at the same time. He was going to Roosevelt, and I was going to the University of Chicago, and then we planned our wedding. And that summer, while I was in Chicago, my in-laws went out to California. It was the first time they'd ever taken a trip in their lives. And my mother, they fell in love with California and called from there and said they bought a house. Manley was furious to think that they were going to desert him like that. But anyhow, they did buy a house there, and they planned on moving there. And they did move there in just a couple of months. They just up and moved. And my mother-in-law had some cousins there, so they had helped them, get settled there and all. So when Vic and I planned to get married in February, when I was finished with school, because I had gone to summer school, so I was finishing sooner than my class. And we got married in February, but his parents did not come to the wedding because my father-in-law said they couldn't afford the fare to come from California to New Jersey. So they were not at his wedding. My mother-in-law was heartsick about it, but there was no way she could get my father-in-law to do anything about it. And we decided after we got married that we would go out to California, and he could, because he had gotten into UCLA. He could go to UCLA, and I had finished school, and I could hopefully get a teaching job there. And so we took a train from New Jersey, stopped in Chicago for several days because most of his family did not come to the wedding. So we stopped there to visit them and so on. And then we got back on the train and went out to California. And that's where 3 of my children were born.
What years?
Oh, you don't think I remember what year?
What year, Danny?
Danny, you know. What year was
Jeannie
Jeannie
was
born?
born in 1949. So we always tease her that she was born in the 40s. And Stephen was born in 1952. And I was born in 1955, and Mary was born in 1959.
Yeah, Mary's I remember because she was the only one born in Chicago, but anyhow, what else do you want to know?
How you moved back to Chicago, were you happy about that?
Well, I was happy about it in the sense that we liked living in California, and my in-laws lived there, and you know, we made friends, and there were some other relatives of Vic's that had come out there too and were living there. But at the time that we moved back, he was working for RCA, and they offered him a very lucrative position in the Chicago area. And I was having some problems with my eyes where I had, something happened where I almost completely lost my vision for a while. And it returned, but at that time I was having these problems, and Vic was offered this position, and we decided that we were going to make the move back to Chicago. And his mother and father had moved back, and we decided we would move back too. And so we did move back. Danny was, I think, 2 at the time, weren't you, Dan? 2 or 3?
Yeah, 2.5.
2.5, yeah. And Jeannie was in school, and Steve had just started kindergarten. So we moved back to Chicago, and we lived on Catalpa. And Manly and Thelma were living in that area, and they helped us find an apartment. And we moved back there, and we stayed there for 20 years.
Did you have a happy life?
Yes, we did have a happy life, I think so. And Dick was very ambitious, and he worked hard, and he was not home very often early. But we worked out the schedule, and on Saturdays we took the kids to breakfast. Remember that, Dan? When we'd go to breakfast every Saturday morning, and then Vic would go and play handball at the JCC, and on Sunday
There's even a court named after him now.
I know, yeah, the memorial, they had him. And then on Sunday, when the weather was nice, he would play.
See it here?
He would play softball with his brothers and you know, some of the fellas in the neighborhood, and he would take the boys with him and to play softball. And
Took you 20 years to get down to Florida.
well, after 20 winters in Chicago, I'd had it. And by that time, Jeannie was married and had moved to Florida, and the thought of sunshine all year round really intrigued me. Now, actually, we went back to California. We took a trip to California to see if we might move back there, but by that time, it had changed so much, and the opportunities were not there anymore for him. And so when Jeannie moved to Florida with Jeff and started calling and saying we should come down, and Jeff would like to do something, you know, that he and Vic could do together. That's how that whole thing started. We went down, and Vic and Jeff went around looking at, Jeff knew some opportunities. He was working for ADP, and he wasn't happy with the territory they'd given him or whatever, so he had looked around, and he decided that they could use a company down there to sell office supplies, because there was only one company that was doing it, and the area was growing so quickly, and business was expanding so much that he felt that there was really room for another company to move in. And we went down there over a Christmas vacation, and he took Vic around to some of these places that he went to, and Vic thought there was a real opportunity too, and he'd always wanted to run his own company. He was with Motorola at the time, and so he took an early retirement, and I was teaching at the time, and I took a retirement too, and we moved to Florida.
You were starting to say that basically you were happy.
Yeah, basically we had a happy marriage, and he was, I think, in many ways a role model for his children. He was rather demanding. He believed that children should have a certain education, and they should, you know, they should have a Hebrew school education, and he would be not around that much, but when he was there, he was with them, at times, and he demanded certain things of them that, I don't know in the long run whether it was good or not, but they knew that he expected certain things of them, and he would help them when he could. I mean, he helped Jeannie with her with her problems in high school when she, helped her when she was having problems with math and so on, and he would sit and help her with it. And every year we would drive to New Jersey to visit my parents, and that was a big highlight in the children's lives because they loved that drive, and they wanted to leave like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he agreed to that, and he'd come home from work and, go to sleep for a while, and then we'd pile into the car, and then with their pillows, it was a happy time. They loved that. And we would always try to stop on the way at a motel that had a swimming pool. That was a big thing because who had swimming pools then? And they could go swimming. And we would take them places, and when we stayed with my folks, I remember taking them one year to Freedom Land in New York, which was a big Disney World type of place, but based on patriotic things, they reenacted the Chicago fire. Do you remember that?
Oh, sure. I
Yeah,
got the water.
Yeah, it was a theme park, patriotic theme park, and we would go places with them, but he wanted his children to be well behaved, and sometimes I think maybe he didn't understand some of them as well as he could, but he wanted them to amount to something, and he wanted them to do well. And he tried to help them, I think, as much as he could. His time was very limited, but we would make, for example, during the week he was never home for dinner at a certain hour. So we got into the habit of I would feed the children dinner at 6 o'clock because the boys by that time were going to Hebrew school and so on. And I would save his dinner, and then when he came home for dinner, and then they would do their homework, and when he came home for dinner, they would come and sit with him for some of that time, and so he could talk to them, and Mary would sit on his lap and stuff food into his mouth because she was little, maybe 2 years old, and then we decided as they got older that we had to have on Saturdays and Sundays he was going to play handball all the time or softball, or that we had to have a family night, so we made it Friday night, and Friday night I would always make dinner, and he would tell the kids, we don't want you to go out on Friday night. If you want to bring friends home for dinner, that's okay. I mean, I was doing the cooking, so he didn't. And, as they got older and they began to date, they would bring kids home. And as they got married, the married ones would come for dinner. And that was our family night, Friday night, where we'd all have dinner together, and we'd light the candles, and he would bless the children. And he was a religious man in that he believed that you should go to services, and he did go to services on Saturday morning lots of times. And he put on tefillin every morning in daven because he said when he was in Europe and he was facing some really harrowing experiences there, he said he promised God that if God would bring him home safely, he would put tefillin on every morning and say the prayers, which he did to the day he died. And he was very pleased, to be able to go to services on Saturday morning. And he had a background, a Jewish background that he maintained a lot of as he got older. So unfortunately, he died at a young age, very suddenly. And we all remember him with a lot of pride and a lot of love. He was a loving father and a very loving husband. And luckily, a very nice man came into my life some years afterwards. But that was his story.
Tell me about the grandkids and what message you would like them to always remember.
Well, I think I've been very, very lucky. I have super grandchildren.
And how do you feel about your grandchildren?
Super. Every one of them is lovable and beautiful. And what I wish for them is that they each grow up to fulfill his or her own destinies to the best of their abilities, and that they know what they want out of life and reach for it and enjoy it, and that they create loving families on their own. And luckily, so far, that has happened. I consider myself a very lucky, fulfilled woman because the background that I came from certainly didn't give me anything too much to go by, but except that I did have a supportive, loving family. Maybe their methods were not what we would consider the best ones today, but we knew as children that they cared about us and that they wanted us to become something in America. I mean, we were first generation Americans, and so I just hope that my grandchildren will be able to achieve in their homes the loving, kind, giving, to give to their children what we try to give to them, and continue on, you know, having that kind of atmosphere in their homes, and to fulfilling themselves as people. I think it's very important to know what you want out of life and to pursue it. And if it doesn't work out for you, to find another means to establish yourself and to care about the people around you.